everyone. Slowly, tentatively, we're all beginning to think about the point where we leave home and start returning to the office. When we do start to go back to the workplace, there'll be a conflict between getting back to business as usual and driving up productivity and ensuring people's health and safety expectations are met. It's a practical and a moral challenge and will significantly impact the way we use offices in the future. Today, we're here to talk about how that process will happen, how technology can help businesses negotiate that balance, and how we will use offices in the future in the medium to long term, as well as beyond the immediate impacts. I'm Mike Phillips, UK editor at Bisnow, and welcome to the latest in our webinar series, where we're trying to keep the real estate industry informed and connected. First of all, today I'd like to say a big thank you to HB Reavis for their help in putting together this webinar. Their knowledge and insight in how people use office space and how technology can be used to make the workplace better has been absolutely invaluable in helping us craft this session. So thank you very much to them. We've got an absolutely fantastic group to discuss this topic today. Our moderator is well-known technology strategist and commentator Anthony Slumbers. And today he'll be putting the questions to HB Reavis UK Leasing Director Peter Victor, and Gilbert Lennox-King, who is head of HB Reavis's Symbiosy tech and sensory platform in the UK and Western Europe. You can see their full biographies on our website. Just a quick note on the tech platform we're using today. As always, you can put questions to our panel on the Q&A function. And also, we do encourage you to chat amongst yourselves on the chat function. You can do that in the public forum or in the private forum as well. And do check out our handout section where HB Reavis have provided a fantastic handout on some of the topics we're going to be talking about today. As always, we encourage you, it's our kind of late afternoon towards the end of the week session, so we encourage you all to have a drink. I've got a nice gamma ray on the go. It is 4 o'clock, so I think it's very valid by now. And without further ado, over to you, Anthony, and our panel to get the discussion going. Thanks very much, all.
Yep, thanks very much, Mike. And before we start, Peter and Gilbert, how's it been in these crazy times? How are you doing?
So far, so good. I think that I for one can't wait to get back to the office, but in the meantime, making the best of it. What about you, Gilbert?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to a bit of face to face. My eyes are going a bit square.
Okay. Yeah. It's a difficult. Even in the best of situations, it's a difficult time. But anyway, at least it stopped raining. So, Peter, first off, HB Reavis. I don't know how much everyone signing into this knows, but could you tell us all about HB Reavis?
Sure. Well, the firm was founded in 1993. And since then, HB Reavis has been developing large, predominantly office and mixed-use assets in major urban markets across Europe. We came to London in 2013, and since then have over 2 million square feet of projects that are either completed or under construction currently or in the pipeline. Recently, we've really been pushing the business into areas beyond what I'll refer to affectionately as the brick and mortar, and particularly focus now really is on how technology can be leveraged to improve performance within the workspace. One of the areas we've been exploring is tech platforms that leverage sensor devices, and how the office environment as a result can be healthier, happier, and more productive places to work.
That's fantastic. I have to say, I absolutely love a landlord developer talking about tech so easily and so much as part of just what they do rather than this add-on. So that's fantastic. So over to you, Gilbert. Right, Symbiosy. What is it? Why did you set it up?
Yeah, so basically Symbiosy is a technology platform that, as Peter said, is designed to do several things. So space utilization, look at indoor environmental quality, and in-company collaborative networks. And we see Symbiosy is basically an extension of the HB Reavis values of people, planet, and performance. And basically, what we're doing is completing the feedback loop. So a lot of times we talk about in the real estate industry about increasing the performance of our assets, but without real-time data, that isn't always possible. So Symbiosy is about bringing that real-time data about how the space is being used in terms of health, indoor environmental quality, and interactions within the space.
And this has been going for a while. You've been thinking about this for a long time. This is not something that's just suddenly popped up in the last because of COVID. This has been in your mind for a long time.
Yeah. So basically, Symbiosy was set up as a separate business unit in 2018, and we did it when we were moving into our new HQ in Bratislava, and it was basically as a result of looking at all the latest technologies out there. As you know, Anthony, we have a couple of innovation scouts full time within HB Reavis, looking at all the latest technologies out there, and we created quite a nice package of technologies within our headquarters, and we said, okay, well, why don't we start looking at this for our tenants? And a lot of our tenants started to take it up, and then we said, okay, well, why don't we promote this out to the wider market?
Fantastic.
So it's basically been going since 2018 as a standalone business.
Brilliant. Peter, we're gonna dive in more in the details of what is happening. Details of Symbiosy, but can we just zoom out for a bit? Can you give us what's your take on the market? What's happening out in reality at the moment whilst we're all quarantined away? Is there a market?
Yes, there is. I mean, certainly in London, where we're based right now, there is absolutely a market. I think, though, that in all the markets, it's really too early to tell from the standpoint of what all of this has done or will do to the traditional kind of supply and demand metrics that everybody mostly focuses on. Just too early to know. But I do think, all things considered, that it really is encouraging that while some deals that have been in flight leading up to this pandemic, that some have been paused, the vast majority of the transactions in London are actually on track, and several quite large ones, notable ones, have just recently completed. So I think that would say that there's definitely some caution out there for sure, but most businesses are continuing to make plans for the future. I will say, Anthony, that one thing that of course this has prompted and why we are here, now talking about it is how we are going to use our office space is definitely going to change. Some things will be short term, immediate things that we have to do just to deal with requirements for social distancing and the like. But I think there are going to be other things that will last beyond pandemic and will actually be adopted going forward. So again, I think that the ability for occupiers to think about they're gonna feel even more responsible. Even more responsible to do whatever they can to make sure the space itself is promoting and appropriately that office environment should be about all the tools that we can give them. What Gilbert is trying to do.
Okay, that's great. I mean, my personal feeling on this is that what's happening is we're accelerating a whole set of trends which were underway anyway. And I'm sort of thinking we are really compressing the next 5 to 10 years is going to be compressing the next 18 months. So that was part of the reason for my question earlier about you've been doing this for a while. It feels to me that the people who've been thinking about this and were thinking about these trends already are in a position to push that on. So let's go on, Gilbert, into the actual details of what you do. Now, I'm thinking if I work in one of your buildings, to get me to come back into one of your buildings, if I was working for a company that was in a building where you had Symbiosy in it, I am going to be very nervous that this building is clean, has good air quality, thinks about humidity, thinks about temperature, is putting fresh air around the building, and is essentially looking after me. Can you talk us through how Symbiosy helps people understand and monitor in real time, and I think that real time is incredibly important, cleanliness within the environment?
Sure, yeah. So I think that whether it's a HB Reavis building or any building, I think that people going back into the office are definitely going to have a heightened awareness of cleanliness. And that's not just in terms of surfaces, it's also in terms of indoor air quality. But what we're doing with technology is basically we have made that information available. So we have CO2 levels freely available, so you can see the CO2 levels throughout the space, you can see the temperature, you can see humidity. The other thing that we're looking at, and we can do at the moment with our indoor positioning technology, is look at cleanliness. So look at time since a cleaner has been to a space. So when they went into a space, how long do they go to that space? How long has it been since that space has been cleaned? So I think that just making that information available to people when they go back into the office will be very powerful. So those two things, cleaning of surfaces and air quality.
Can you explain why should people be interested in CO2 levels and humidity? Because I'm not sure. I think you're going to find a lot of people are going to understand now, but certainly go back 60 days and you mentioned CO2 and humidity, it doesn't really mean anything, but it is important. Can you explain why it's important?
Sure, yeah. So we've been talking about CO2 levels in meeting rooms for a number of years now, and that's basically because HB Reavis has such a big focus on wellness in our buildings. But the CO2 level is basically a proxy for how much fresh air is going through the space. So there's a lot of research now to say that high CO2 levels have a bad effect on your ability to think. But with the current situation, high CO2 level just means there's not enough fresh air being circulated in the space. Humidity is an interesting one because there's quite a lot of research to say that having very low levels of humidity might be an issue, but that's probably not as big a factor as CO2 if you're talking about the most important things to look at when you go into a space.
So it's really on two axes that cleanliness is important. Clearly, it's really, really important at the moment when there's a heightened need for everything to be clean. But longer term, when people talk about, well, how can you make anyone productive in the workplace? This CO2 and its impact on cognitive function is a big deal, isn't it? So I think there's
absolutely.
Peter was talking about the earlier about some things which are going to be really important now, but are going to carry on. But I think people will suddenly start having an awareness of why these things are important, which just sort of heightens the power of it. Can we move on to workplace density? Because the other thing I'm going to be bothered with, because I'm putting myself in the shoes of someone who's coming back into a place that has Symbiosy in there. I'm going to want to know that there is space for me in my workplace, that there's not too many people in there, but I also want to have some idea of, are the people I need to see going to be in there? So in terms of helping companies schedule who should be in this business, in this building at one time, how many people, and then where they should be. I know that's all part of the workplace density map. Can you take us through that, please?
Yeah, so I think, if you're starting out going back into the office, bare bones, you would want to know that there's enough space in the office that people can have social distancing, that social distancing can take place. So what we've done specifically in our HQ is put up basically screens that show how many people are in each different space. And then it's basically just a very simple dial that shows you when so many people in a space and alerts you to that. So I think that is kind of the most basic thing that people should be looking at in terms of workplace density. Is there too many people in a space that social distancing isn't going to be able to take place? The second thing is, to your point, Anthony, about collaboration. So we have installed indoor location positioning, which basically shows how different departments interact within a space. That's interesting when you look at how people are going back into the office. Are those networks reinforcing? So those physical networks. And we're also looking at Office 365 integration, so we can compare digital and physical collaboration. But I think one of the challenges that we may see for management is that they're not really going to, as a manager managing teams of larger number of people, how are you going to know who's interacting with who, when, and if enough interaction is happening? Those sorts of things that happen invisibly, maybe not as easy to see.
Okay.
Anthony, just
Yep.
as Peter, I had a problem with my my tech, but I just dialed in here just to add a little bit to Gilbert's comments there. I think that it's going to be very, very important to be able to give that tool to that company to be able to just see who is going where, when, how, because you can't. Right now you have no way of doing that in the absence of having this type of technology. So I think that's just from a pure operational management standpoint, it's going to be critical.
I think this network thing is actually really, really interesting. It's something that within the tech industry, people obviously pay a huge attention to networks and who interacts with who, and we don't really pay enough attention within the workplace to who interacts with who. And there's so much evidence and research about the need for teams to interact a lot and then to interact with third parties. But I think this is one of those sort of second order impacts of a real estate solution that actually has very solid business applicability. The next thing, so I'm happy that the building's clean. I'm happy about the density, but I don't want to touch anything. So in terms of touch points, in terms of reducing touch points, how far are we going to be able to go to have a sort of touchless environment on things that I really don't need to touch?
Yeah, it's something we've been thinking about a lot recently, around contact-free technologies for dispensers, for doors, not just Symbiosy, but our workplace consultants and the workplace consultants that we work with. How are you going to limit touch, whether it's door handles or screens or keyboards, the coffee machine? There's all sorts of areas you could touch, but it's about reducing those touch points. So one of the ways that we're seeing out in the Far East is implementing thermal imaging. Now that may be not something that's appropriate or even that useful, but we're seeing that in Singapore, for example, that seems to be fairly widespread. So there are different ways to deal with it, but it is an issue. Definitely, the reducing of touch points is.
But reducing touch points by using one's own phone to control one's environment is a big step on that way, isn't it? The more I can control the workplace I don't care about touching my own phone. So the more I can do like that. So that's where I think this is is interesting. The number of things that are going into your app, which can turn up on my phone. It's really never ending.
That's right.
Touch points that could move from being a physical object to my phone. The fourth big thing. So I'm clean. I'm happy with the density. I'm reducing touch points by after using my phone and other things. But somebody gets ill in the workplace. How can Symbiosy help us in terms of contact tracing, in terms of being able to understand that we don't have to just send the whole workforce home? We can be a lot more precise, intuitive, and tech-enabled in tracing who we need to trace. Can you talk us through that, please?
Sure. So we have implemented very accurate indoor location beacons within our headquarters, which basically shows within 0.6 of a meter where people are within the space. We had our own instance within Symbiosy where a couple of our team members went to Hungary and they came back into the office. A couple of days later, they were found out to be COVID positive. So what we actually were able to do is, this wasn't something obviously that we had planned as a use case, but we were able to see exactly where they went within the space, so we could have those spaces deep cleaned, and we were able to identify all the people that they interacted with so that they could go and get tested. So that was a very specific use case that we came up with. That was just a result of having the technology there. And I think it shows the value of having a flexible solution there that you can actually react to that situation fast. So I think if we're looking at what is really required for people moving back into the office, you want to know it's clean, the air is fresh, but also that you can react to situations as they happen.
Yeah, it's powerful stuff. Can I actually bring in one of the questions that comes in, which is a very classic question down this line. So what has been? This is from Dominic. What has the feedback been from building users about their every move being tracked and monitored? Have you found much pushback from people who feel like this is another step towards a Big Brother state? Thank you. I'm sure you've all heard this one before.
Yes, we've heard that before, and basically our solution's GDPR compliant, and people opt into the solution. So if you don't want to be part of it, you're not part of it. It's about looking at the benefits versus the risks for each individual, and it's up to them. And we don't monitor. It's probably worth just going deeper into this point because we do get asked it a lot. But we don't publish individual level data. It's just around departmental interactions, and we don't monitor outside of the office. So any common areas or bathrooms, anything like that, that's not monitored.
Isn't it also true that there's an awful lot of this data that doesn't need to know who the individual is? That it's more to do with cohorts and behavior and understanding how the team en masse uses space. That the actual individual. I often think there's a lot of worry about this, which is it's sort of unnecessary because the system's actually not that interested in you as an individual a lot of the time. Most of the time, it's interested in at a higher level. It's not nearly as intrusive or desires to be as intrusive as a lot of people think. So I'm moving on to the. Sorry, Peter, did you want to come in?
Yeah. I was just going to say, I just think that as Gilbert was saying, really it's just the individual's position within the office. So I think it is natural when any type of disruption is occurring and there's changes and there's okay, wait a second, there's sensors being used and what's going on, and I think that it's natural to question that, but I think the reality is that if really you're just talking about the position in the office and that's it's not like it's accessing any other piece of information or anything at all about the person. I just think it's going to be hugely valuable and frankly incredibly important for certainly during the initial return back to the office, just to manage a real-time story just the way Gilbert described, where we ourselves had it and used it to help us make sure the rest of the office was protected. And anyway, I think that I don't think it's going too far, and I think it's going to be incredibly valuable, particularly in the near term.
Yeah, and of course there is the point that you have to be GDPR compliant, and you are GDPR compliant, which is pretty damn strict to be honest.
Yeah.
So if you are okay. Steve Hutton has asked, what evidence do you have to prove that monitoring the environment does improve the performance of people? So I imagine he's thinking in terms of what we were talking about earlier of the impact on cognitive function of different things.
Yeah,
do anyone want to say a bit more about
I think Gilbert is very happy that somebody asked that question. Go ahead, Gilbert.
There's some great studies actually. I'm happy to share them with you afterwards. Basically, Harvard University have published a lot of research recently on the impact of high CO2 levels on the brain's ability to think, and they've done various different studies. The Well Institute also have published a number of studies. So I'm happy to circulate some links to those after this. But it's not just about CO2, it's about a number of other factors, but CO2 is kind of the big one that people, I think, understand as essentially a proxy for fresh air.
Okay. Well, actually, the fresh air thing I think is really important. I have to say I didn't realize until recently that a great deal of air conditioning just recirculates air that's in the building, and doesn't actually use much fresh air, which suddenly struck me as being less than optimum. Alex asked an interesting question. Is HB Reavis engaging with its occupiers in sharing data to enable both parties to utilize the value of the tech? So how much do you work closely with occupiers so to enable the occupiers to benefit from all this data?
So we do work with several occupiers that have basically implemented Symbiosy. We work closely with those ones. We haven't. That's a good point, actually. Peter can probably answer that in more detail, but in terms of en masse across all of our occupiers, I don't think we've got a comms campaign to share a lot of this information.
I think it's mostly just because we're so early in the rollout of the product. I think that that soon enough that absolutely is the point, and I think that that over the coming months and years we're going to start to have much more to work with, and frankly be learning from our occupier clients just what works best, what are the things that we should be building on, but it's very, very early days, so we are looking forward to having more of that exact type of data to work with.
Yeah.
One thing, just Anthony, on the previous point about CO2, I just think that it's very important to recognize the fundamental difference that this platform does is it really is empowering the actual employees within the organization in a way that, the question before was sort of what studies have been done to prove. Well, I can tell you that literally anyone who has been in a conference room that has had too many people and not enough fresh air could feed into that type of a study. They may not know exactly what's going on in that room, and the reason is that there's no data, no information available to them to know. And now, and I can tell you this because we've got it in our office. We look across to a like a tablet basically that's mounted on the wall that has the Symbiosy data. And what do you know? All of a sudden, it starts to flash. It means that we've brought too many people into the room. The CO2 is too high, and that's it. And so but before you have that information, you just don't have any way of knowing. All you know is you're feeling like you're about to go to sleep, and you don't know whether it's because the person who has been droning on at the other side of the table is just boring you. It's actually because you can't breathe.
Yeah.
And anyway, so I think it's a big difference to just have the data to work with, so that you can react right there, real time, and deal with it. So I think that's a huge part of it.
I think you're right, Peter, and I think it's it's telling us that first of all, if you don't have any data, you can't do any of this. And but what's happening now, because we now really have to pay attention to this stuff, we're going to get used to it, and we're going to start the flywheel of understanding more and more what the data can give us, and how we can use it. And I think this is really, because we're now densifying, going to have to de-densify our offices. We really have no choice but to make them as productive and effective as possible. And I personally don't see how you can do it without data and then the systems to act upon that data. Can I ask you a technical question that's coming from John? Do you have or need 3D internal models to visualize the data captured effectively? And if so, how do you get it? I don't know. That's sort of above my pay grade. 3D visual.
Yes, we do. We have an interactive 3D model that has a lot of the data overlaid on top of it. So happy to talk you or John through that after this. But yeah, it's an interactive 3D model that has a lot of this information overlaid on it.
Excellent. Okay.
And again, I would say that if you're running an office with the benefit of that 3D model at your desk, if you're the one who's really responsible for making sure that people aren't overloading one area or another, all of a sudden, again, in the old days, you'd have to lurk around, I suppose, and just try to cover all 10 of your floors by yourself. Anyway, it's now you literally would have a screen that can see everybody and where they are at all times. So again, completely different, powerful position to be in.
Can I ask you how you're finding? Do you think Symbiosy will help make workplaces with higher utilization, but at the same time better satisfaction? Because clearly the traditional office is the utilization is not very good, but actually also the satisfaction isn't good. How do we get both of them up? And is real-time data part of the key to unlocking that extra value?
Yes, I would say, short term, there's definitely several things you can do now to alleviate some of the fear maybe of going back into the office and build trust. And that is all about making data available to the people. So it's about clean, has it got fresh air, is it sparsely occupied? And those are kind of the three areas that I would focus on. And just making that information available, because once you've got that information, then it can alleviate a lot of the fear about going back into the office. To your point earlier, a lot of offices you wouldn't know what the air quality is like, and just having that information there that this space has been recently cleaned, the air is fresh, that there's a certain number of people there that we have decided is safe. That those three factors should be quite a good way in terms of steps back into the office.
Can I just ask you, how do you communicate this back to the individuals, the actual occupiers? So if I'm just Joe me working in a Symbiosy powered space, how do I know any of this stuff?
So the first thing is we have big screens and common areas that have information available there. but also on your phone, so you can get it on your phone, so it's personalized for you.
Oh, right.
Anthony, I'm gonna cut you all off here. Unfortunately, I'm sure we could go on for longer. There is one question. Well, it's more a kind of, Peter, a sort of question for you. I'm sort of paraphrasing a discussion that's been going on in the chat regarding. People have made the point. It's great talking about what happens when we're in the office, but people are obviously worried about the fact that, you've got to commute into the office in the first place. And if we're all packing onto the tube or the Southwest trains, that poses a risk as well. And people are sort of speculating whether this leads to a kind of retreat from this trend that we've seen of people, heading into city centres and, city centre office space being the absolute sort of premium and moving more perhaps to a model of, sort of satellites and hubs in more suburban locations. What do you think this will do to that trend that's been, that seemed absolutely unstoppable of the city centre office and where occupiers actually want to take space in the world?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's certainly going to be some sort of hub and spoke moves. I'm sure that'll evolve. I also think, again, a little bit too early to tell in terms of what are we going to settle into ultimately after the pandemic does in fact pass. But as I said earlier, there's going to be some habits and preferences that will probably stay for the long term. I think it's very, very early days to try to predict that too specifically. I do think, though, that it's always going to be driven, I think, mostly by where people really want to live, and so on the basis that cities and an urban environment remains very, very popular, then I do think that the demand for urban offices will remain. But as I said at the outset, I think it's way too early to tell or to predict something so early in the phase, as we haven't even gotten through the first phase of this process yet.
And how about demand for co-working / flexible space? Because obviously that has the benefit of flexibility in terms of leases, but obviously the problem that people are maybe a little bit more wary about using communal spaces. How do you see demand for that sector change?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, so immediately, I mean, what this has been going on for whatever it's been, 6-7 weeks, and during that short period of time, we had sort of initial very big worries about the serviced office sector and lots of kind of reduction in demand. But since then, more recently, I think there are bigger companies that are starting to see the need potentially to leverage those spaces even more. So hard to know. Likewise about the whole density topic. You have one theory that if we have to have the social distancing and maybe there's going to be more working from home, is that going to drop overall demand for office space? But then counter to that is the fact that the direction in the commercial real estate business over the past 20 years or so has been every year it seemed like the goal was to see how many more people you could pack into space, and that probably wasn't a great goal. And so now I think there will obviously be a move away from that density, which means that in theory there would actually be more space that could be needed in total. So just have too early to tell how it's all going to shake out, but you can see the forces on both sides of all these questions.
Sure, thank you so much. Well, I think one thing's for certain, it's going to be a sort of sociological and psychological experiment in real time, the sort of process of going back into the office. And it'll be fascinating to see how it plays out, and also incredibly influential on this huge sector of commercial real estate called offices. So thank you so much, all of you, your input into that topic, and it'll be fascinating maybe catching up in a few months' time to when we are all back in work to see how this is actually playing out in reality. But thank you so much all for your input. To our audience, thank you so much for your questions and for your contributions in the chat. Do tune in. We've got 2 of these a week. We're trying, as I say, we're trying to keep you informed and connected while you can't actually all come into the same room. So do keep checking the website and finding out what we've got coming up. So thank you very much all. Thank you very much. Have a great afternoon. Take care.
Thanks, guys.